Hey guys, welcome back to R.A.R.E. I'm your host, Boulanger, and this is Real Answers for Real Experiences. We're going to get right back into the series Collide, where faith and mental health intersect. This will be episode number 4. And today we're going to highlight how our decisions have outcomes, sometimes immediate and sometimes more delayed. I read a report one time that we make about 3,000 decisions per day. I'm not sure how true that is. I'm not sure what they were considering a decision, but I do believe we make hundreds of decisions per day. We make decisions on what time we're going to get up for work or school. We make decisions on what we're going to have for breakfast, if we're going to drink coffee or not, if we're going to take our lunch or whether we're going to take lunch out at work. We make all kind of decisions: who we're gonna hang with, who we're gonna ride to work with, are we gonna ride the school bus, are we gonna be a car rider? All kinds of decisions are made every single day, and every one of those decisions have an outcome. You understand? And there's only two types of outcomes when it comes to making a decision. Most of the time we don't think about this because sometimes we don't know the difference between a decision and a choice. Decisions and choices are distinctly different. Okay? They're married together, they go hand in hand, but they're different. And so I'm going to highlight what that is today as well. But there's only two types of outcomes: benefits and consequences when we make decisions. Anything that's beneficial has the ability to cause me to make progress, has to cause me to prepare, has the potential to cause me to be propelled forward. Anything that's a consequence has the potential to keep me stuck in the same place that I am or cause me to regress. Okay? There's no in between. So when you make a decision, you understand, it's coming with an outcome, whether that's immediate or delayed. All right? When we think about mental health and why people get bogged down with stress and what people call anxiety, when people are frustrated and irritated and walk around angry all the time, oftentimes that is because decisions that they've made, you understand, has complicated their lives because of the outcomes that they produce. See, every decision we make it with the intent that it's going to be beneficial. Nobody makes a decision that they think is going to be consequential to them. Let me give you a crazy example. The bank robber will go into a bank and hold up the bank, not because he believes it's going to give him consequences. Yes, he understands he's breaking the law, but he thinks that the benefit of getting the money is going to outweigh the potential for consequence. See, so when he made that decision, he thought his outcome was going to be beneficial. And if he got an opportunity to spend the money, maybe for him it was beneficial for a short period of time, but the consequence was surely coming. All right. And so when we began to think about our decision making, we have to have an understanding that the thought process that goes into it is super, super important. See, because remember, mental health is just simply the state or condition of how we think. Remember, if we're thinking poorly or negatively, our behavior will be poor or negative, which means the outcomes of our decisions are going to also be poor or negative. If we're thinking in a positive manner, then our behavior should look just like that. It should be positive, which means our outcomes, our thinking should be positive, which means our outcomes should be positive. You see, we have to quit walking around life just making all kind of willy-nilly decisions as if outcomes are not coming, because they are. And so let's go to the scriptures so we can get example again of how this whole mental health uh, um, epidemic that we see right now, it's not a new thing, it's an old thing. God told us that there's nothing new under the sun. So poor decision making has always been a part of mankind. Consequence and benefit has always been a part of mankind. The problem is we just get in the habit of making some of those hundreds to thousands of decisions, and we don't consider that what we're making decisions about may have uh, or will produce outcomes that may not always be beneficial. So let's jump into the scriptures. I won't show you anything today for sake of time, but we understand the story. If you are a believer, you know the story, and if you're a non-believer, you've heard the story. You know, and we've already visited these two stories. But remember when Eve gave the fruit to Adam, Adam ate. Their eyes were opened, and they realized that they were naked. They hid themselves from God. Okay, when God came looking for Adam, it wasn't that God was looking for him. He knew exactly what had happened. He knew exactly what Adam had done. Adam says, I heard I heard you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked. The Lord said, who told you that you were naked? Adam said, the woman. The woman said, the serpent. The serpent said, no, I'm just playing. The serpent didn't say anything. But Adam blamed the woman for his decision. The woman blamed the serpent for her decision. But the problem is Eve listened to evil communication, which always brings temptation. She made a poor decision and failed. Eve was the evil communication for Adam. He makes a poor decision and he also falls. But isn't that just like what we do today? When we make a poor decision and we start receiving consequences of that decision, don't we look for somebody to blame? Isn't it difficult to say, you know what? I messed up. I missed the mark. I should have did this or I should have did that. I'm not talking about feeling guilty. I'm not talking about feeling shame. I'm talking about owning the poor decision and the consequence. Okay. I'm gonna give you a few tips at the end on how to move forward from these things. Okay. But when we jump to chapter number 4 and we look at the situation that happened between Cain and Abel, well, we understand the Lord had already addressed Cain about his feelings, his anger and his sadness. And the Lord encouraged Cain and told him, listen, if you do well, you'll be accepted. And if you don't, sin is waiting at the door. The Lord assigned sin human personification, which is human characteristics. And so Cain called his brother out to the field, killed his brother, and then when the Lord questioned Cain about what he had done and where his brother was, what did Cain do? He shuns responsibility. God says, where is your brother, Cain? Cain says to the Lord, am I my brother's keeper? Shunning responsibility. He understood clearly what God was asking. He knew why God was asking, but he didn't want to own the consequences that are coming from the decision that he had just made. You understand? So now, when the Lord gives him consequence, he curses Cain, curses him from the ground. His labor is going to be hard because Cain was a worker of the ground. His labor is going to be hard. And Cain says something that was strange to me. Cain says to the Lord, my punishment, my consequences are too hard or too harsh. They're too difficult, God. This is too much for me to bear, God. Now, hold it. Didn't Cain just murder his brother? Didn't he? And he's talking to the Lord about the consequences that God had given him was too difficult for him. In fact, he goes on to say that he'll be made a wanderer, and if somebody finds him, they will kill him. Now, why is Cain worried about the consequence of murder when he had just murdered his brother? You see how mental unwellness has always been? See, that's called unwellness. See, when we ignore the behavior we had just engaged in, when we're in the middle of getting our just due, right? When we're in the middle of receiving justice for what we've done, consequence for what we've done, we begin to think about who? Just ourselves. This is too hard for me. Why it got to be like this? You see, but he did not give the same grace and mercy to his brother. Why? Because he was in his feelings. See, that's how all of these things play together. What you feel, what you think, your behavior, your consequences, they all play together. You see, we live in a world right now where there are so many people trying to push for a society and a culture that has no boundaries, no limits, no standards, and no morals. But just as sure as I'm sitting here and you're listening to me, understand the decisions you make with a boundless, moralless, godless society, the decisions that are made will have outcomes. And I guarantee you they won't be beneficial. You see, because when you look at just these two chapters, as we set the stage for the faith and mental health intersection, when they did not want to accept their own decisions, they also didn't want to accept their consequences. And when we make poor decisions, we will get consequences that match that. We absolutely will. And that's why it looks like we have a societal downturn right now. That's why it looks like we have a mental unwellness epidemic. I'm not calling it a mental health epidemic because health is just, again, the state or condition of. The state of people's thinking is poor, is negative, it lacks morals, it lacks character, it lacks integrity. And so the reason why it looks like society is crumbling, because it's crumbling under the pressure of sin. You see, the Lord told us that the wages of sin is death. There was no only if, there was no but. It was the wages of sin is death. So whether that's death physically, whether that's death spiritually, or whether that's death both, the consequences for our bad behavior, our bad decisions are not going to be well. We have to begin to understand we can't just make hapless decisions. We can't just walk around and not give adequate thought, adequate effort, adequate consideration to the decisions that we make, because we're going to get outcomes that most of us are unwilling to deal with. And then we want to couch everything under the tag mental health. But it doesn't even have to get that bad. It doesn't even have to get as bad as it has become and as worse as it's going to get. It doesn't. We have to become a people, one by one, not group by group, not demographic by demographic, but one by one, household by household, community by community, city by city, state by state. We have to become a people who give consideration to the decisions that we're making. You see, if we just keep making these poor decisions, this least generation that we have, and maybe the generation that came right before them, they don't have a chance because they're watching the older generations make poor decisions. So what kind of decisions are they going to know to make? You see, they're watching grandma and mom and dad, and if mom and dad are in the picture, whoever they're watching. So when they watch us As grown adults make poor decisions, what kind of decisions do the younger generations learn to make? Poor decisions. When they see mom dating three and four guys, right? None of them is my daddy. You follow what I'm saying? What is young children gonna look at? Well, I guess I can date three or four guys. Or you know what? Let me double that. I can date six or seven. Well, forget. You know what? I don't even have to date. I can just sleep around. Poor decision. Poor decisions. If I see my mom and dad drink or smoke, my grandparents drink or smoke, my uncles, my aunties, and them drink or smoke, what do I pick up? That I should be able to drink or smoke. Why? Because they did it. I should be able to do it. Poor decisions. This is why it seems like nobody can tell anybody anything. But see, because everybody's watching everybody else make poor decisions and not be willing to deal with the consequence. This is what happens in our finances. We just feel like we want to go buy the new suit, the new dress, the new car, not even giving consideration. If I make the decision to go and buy it, the immediate consequences I got to pay for it. The long term outcome is, can I afford it? See, we're just running around life making decisions, and then when life becomes complicated, because remember, poor decisions will complicate our lives. So now, when life becomes complicated, now I'm stressed out. Now, being stressed out all the time begins to affect my health. It affects it begins to affect your digestion. It begins to affect your blood pressure. It begins to affect your vascular system, your muscular system. And we wondering why we have chronic diseases now. A lot of that comes from beyond eating, poor eating. It comes from poor decisions produce consequence. Consequence produce complication. Complication increases stress. See, I know that there are some things in life that just happen, but everything ain't just happening to us, guys. We got to take a step back and look at the decisions that we are making. So let me give you a few tips to close this session out. Number one, know the difference between choices and decisions. A choice are your options. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're taking a multiple choice test on an exam. So whatever the question is, you have A, B, C, and D. A, B, C, and D are your options. Those are the choices that you can select from. Whichever one you select is your decision. So if you say the answer is A and you put that on your paper, then you made a decision. So choices are the options that you can make a selection from, and the actual selection is your decision. So tip number one, know what your choices are. Know your choices. Tip number two, learn to consider outcomes. Learn to consider outcomes. Stop just running around life, just doing stuff haplessly. And then when consequence comes, now you're looking like I need somebody to help me out. Now I'm looking like, life just keeps happening to me. No, life is happening because you make bad decisions. I know you guys may be thinking, well, Boulanger, you ain't made no, I've made plenty of bad decisions. And you know what's going to happen? As long as I keep living, I'm going to make some more bad decisions. But I'll tell you what I have learned. I've learned to press pause and consider my options before I make a selection. And tip number three, learn to be okay with the decisions that you make. I meet so many people in my field of counseling who straddle the fence between two decisions. And God clearly told us, let your yes be yes, let your no be no. So if you follow the first two tips, know what your options are. Consider the outcomes. When you make your decision, know that you made it thoughtfully. Not thoughtfully all that's sweet, but no, thoughtfully full of thought. Stop making decisions without processing it all the way out. Know your choices, tip number one. Consider the outcomes. You know, there's only two outcomes: consequences or benefits. Benefits uh, prepare you forward, consequences keep you stuck or cause you to regress. And then tip number three, be willing to live with the decision because you processed it out. Listen, I appreciate you guys for hanging out with us. I'm your guy, Boulanger. This is Real Answers for Real Experiences, and I'm out.